Margaret, thank you so much for being with me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It's such a privilege,
Oh,
honestly.
thank you. It's wonderful to talk to you too.
Thank you. I too am the daughter of a schizophrenic mother,
Mhm.
and I have found very few resources in my journey with this life experience. I've read your book twice, and
Wow.
it was an answer to many prayers. And
Wow.
the conclusion I got to was that I feel this book is an essential, vital resource for any child of a schizophrenic parent, but above all, with schizophrenic mothers. So thank you
Hmm.
so much. Um,
Thank you for that feedback. It's just so heartening to hear that the book has helped you.
yes, definitely. So I want to start the interview with a quote from your book, which is, "My mother was tormented by schizophrenia, and I, by proximity, was tortured by it also." You were also the daughter of a schizophrenic
Mhm.
mom. She developed it when you were 7, and you have a PhD in psychology. Did your childhood experience directly influence your career path?
Absolutely. Um, like many therapists and counselors, I grew up with mental illness in my family, and I um, helped to take care of my mother, and in fact, lived with her for 5 years when I was a young teen, and literally took care of her um, during that time. And so, as I grew older, I realized I could help other people with mental illness as well. I also wanted to do research into the effects of growing up with a schizophrenic parent. That was another reason I went into psychology.
So that leads to my second question, which is that you co-wrote this book with Doris Parker Roberts. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be?
Mhm. Sure. Doris and I were therapists in the same group, therapy group. And we were just talking one day at lunch, and I was talking about what my dissertation as in my PhD program was. And she said, "Oh, I've done research, written research with people who grew up with mentally ill mothers." And I said, "Wow." So we just started talking about collaborating our information. And at the time, I had considered writing a book, but the dissertation was so fresh, I could not imagine turning the that into something a lay reader would want to read. It was all in my head. It was very scholarly, and so she helped a lot in making it more readable for people who are not in academia. So that's how that came about.
The secondary victims of schizophrenia need support. The children of schizophrenic parents were the silent victims of this mental illness and the most vulnerable and in desperate need of support and guidance. How can children of schizophrenic parents be supported so that they're not dealing with the full force of trauma on a daily basis?
Hmm, that's such a wonderful question. It's so multi-layered, the answer. So ideally, there is at least one high functioning adult in the child's life when they're growing up. And that person can help take care of the schizophrenic person and shield the child from a lot of the effects of the disease. When that doesn't happen, I don't have statistics, but it often does not happen for a lot of reasons.
Right.
For instance, extended family can be very put off by the schizophrenia,
Yeah.
and afraid of the behaviors that the schizophrenic person is exhibiting, and so they tend to stay away a lot of times rather than move in and help. So if, as you can imagine, adults are afraid of those behaviors a lot of times. You can imagine how the children are feeling.
Yeah.
And also the behaviors of the schizophrenic mom will often push away people who try to help.
Yes.
Uh, we had a neighbor visit our home one time, uh, asking if she could do something to help because she had seen my mom out in the street, whatever. And my mother literally chased her down the sidewalk, and she never came back. So it's a very complicated situation. So then comes the next layer of people who could help. Schools, they often don't have any clue what's going on, and the schizophrenic mom will often chase them away as well when they do try to intervene. And mental health professionals often are so overburdened with trying to help the schizophrenic person and many, many others that they don't even have time to think about the children.
Right.
And when they do think about the children, they really don't know what to do.
That's right.
So one of the things I was hoping my book would do would be to educate folks who are in the mental health field to take a look at and inquire about who do you live in the home with? How are they doing? Now, again, we have laws that say the mental health professional can't talk to the family without the schizophrenic person's consent. So that's a barrier, because sometimes they say, no, I don't want you talking to my family.
Yes.
But, if there's a good relationship between the mental health professional and schizophrenic person, that can be overcome sometimes. And I would encourage mental health professionals to try.
Right.
And refer family members for support through NAMI, through therapy.
Yeah.
And not just treat the schizophrenic person, but everybody in the family who's being affected by this disease.
Exactly, because it's not only the children, the partners as well.
The partners, absolutely.
Yeah, and how they
partners are often confused and don't know what to do. Yes.
Schizophrenia is generally thought to be the most severe form of mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Most patients and families isolate themselves, believing that they're the only ones going through this turmoil. Mm-hmm. What is your opinion about psychoeducation available today to help children of schizophrenics?
It's better than it used to be, but that's not saying a lot. There are articles now, my book and several other books, who do talk about the experience of having a mentally ill parent, especially a mother, just because mothers are usually the caretakers in our society still. Not to take away from the fathers, the importance of the fathers, but that's usually who's around the children more. So it is better. There are, there's NAMI, which is a group for family members, that's in the United States anyway, of people with mental illness. That's National Association for the Mentally Ill, NAMI. And but we need much, much more. And I would like to see every person with schizophrenia have their family, what's the word I'm looking for? Given literature, just like we would give literature for other illnesses.
Exactly.
Give them literature about what is going on with their mom and how they can A, help, and B, take care of themselves.
Yes.
What they can expect, and what resources are available for them.
Exactly, because I've talked to friends who even say, well, my mom was an alcoholic and there was support. There's different kind of support networks, even for terminally ill, parents who have other illnesses. And with this one, we're pretty much on our journey, finding resources and trying to meet other people as well who can relate to this experience, because otherwise it's kind of like, oh, just tell your mom to take medication, she'll be right.
Yeah. Yeah, and 70% of people with schizophrenia refuse to take medication, which is a huge barrier for their getting better.
Exactly.
One reason I wrote the book was that I was a psychology student in the 1980s, and lots of literature started coming out about families of parents with an addiction, alcoholic parents, and so on. And I kept waiting for the next wave to be about the effects of mental illness on families.
Yes.
and it never came. So I decided to write this book I wanted to read.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I honestly, that's why a friend of mine recommended it a few months ago. And she said, Sandy, it's called Growing Up with a Schizophrenic Mother. And I was like, but it has my name all over it. I grew up with a schizophrenic mother. And in that instant,
Sandy.
yeah, in that instant, I bought it and I devoured the book
Mm,
because there were so many things that you can relate to, that other people, even close friends who are empathetic and they're supportive, and that's really appreciated. A lot of the times when you talk perhaps to people who don't really understand the depth and the sadness and everything that this entails, they're like, oh, you'll be right. And they don't
mhm.
really know.
I talk about it being a language that only we can understand at a certain point
Yes,
because we've been through it, because other people's eyes glaze over, like they can't wrap their heads around it because it's so bizarre. It's
exactly.
mhm,
Exactly. And you've touched right now on the point of patients refusing to take their medication.
mhm,
What can we do as children and I'm going through this right now. My mum is
mm,
72 and she's been stable. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, she said,
aw,
I'm not taking medication and you can't force me. And beyond that, it's just going into a war that you don't want to,
right.
because they become very defensive. What can we do?
That's such a wonderful question, and you're speaking to the frustration and the despair that we as
Yes.
children and family and loved ones feel, because I think she's right. There is nothing you can do until she's ready.
Wow.
So I know your mom is in Australia. I know that here, I don't know what you can do. There are laws that say we can't force medication on people here, unless they're a danger to themselves or others. And that's often not the case. Not everybody who is schizophrenic is a danger to themselves or others. In fact, it's a small minority.
Exactly.
And so, I'm with you. What can we do?
Yeah. It's really tough because I live in Mexico City and my brother is the caretaker, and he called me, Sandy, she's
Mhm,
refusing to take medication.
mhm,
And it just breaks your heart because
mhm.
everything that you gain. I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little bit emotional.
I think that's allowed.
Um, there's this profound sadness because everything that has been um, channeled toward getting her stable and achieving that, and then all of a sudden for that to go out the window because
Mm.
I just don't want to anymore.
A whim. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and I feel for my brother because it's a frustration that we as rational people, it's like we cannot understand it. And in her
Mhm,
mind, it's like, leave me be.
mhm,
And the doctors have said that if she has refused and she's not a danger to anybody, we cannot make her take medication. And
mhm,
she literally has to be at a point where she's committed for you to be her guardian. So we're waiting literally for things to get out of control.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how everything's set up right now.
Yes.
I don't. There was a woman in my book whom I interviewed, and she's an attorney, and she talked about, she does have guardianship of her mom now as an adult, but she talked about her mother. Every time she went in the hospital, she would get better and be functioning well, and come home, shut the front door, and say, "I'm not taking that medicine anymore."
Wow. Yeah.
And then, boom, off we went onto another downhill slide.
God.
And sometimes you can understand why the schizophrenic person doesn't want to take medications. They can be very sedating. My own mom was on Thorazine for 3 years between my age 7 and 10, and she did nothing but stare at the wall that I can remember.
Yeah.
That's all she did. And that was pretty standard for Thorazine takers back then. And when I was 10, she decided all the doctors were in a plot against her to keep her sedated. Well, of course, that wasn't true, but I could see where she got really sick of being so sedated, and she stopped taking medication at that point. So that's another complicated issue.
Why do you think, Margaret, it is that the offspring of parents with schizophrenia have higher rates of both sibling conflict and aggression?
Mm. That's one of the hallmarks of my book, because I kept reading the research that was out there was not talking about life in the family from the child's point of view. It was talking about looking at the children as uh, uh, genetic relatives of the schizophrenic person. So when researchers talked to the children or looked at the children and they had high rates of misbehavior or depression or anxiety or whatever, they assumed that it was for genetic reasons. And that there may indeed be a genetic component. I'm not a scientist of that sort that can figure out the genetic influences of having a schizophrenic parent. However, I wanted to tell the story from the children's point of view, which was we grew up in chaos. We grew up with the caretaker. Our caretaker had bizarre behaviors and was out of control often.
Yes.
And we were upset. We were angry. We were grieving. We were sad. And
Yes.
we expressed it as children do by acting out a lot of times.
Yes.
So I wanted to balance that out, that they're not necessarily pathologically defective.
Right.
They may be in part responding to their environment. And let's take the whole picture into consideration.
Exactly. Yes. When you consider your formative years are the most important ones, and you're surrounded by turmoil and chaos and a lot of the time aggression, that very bizarre behavior that, I mean, you're starting your way out in this world, and that is what you're seeing. It's tough.
It is tough. And you have your primary relationship is mom.
Exactly.
And the attachment is flawed at best,
Right.
because of usually her inability to attach in a healthy way.
One of the symptoms many people don't talk about is abolition, the lack of goal orientation and apathy. It's estimated that 25% of schizophrenic patients are withdrawn and unmotivated, and it's often mistaken for laziness. I have felt that it's my responsibility to motivate my mom. How can children seeing this in their parent help and also process this?
Well, that's another wonderful question. And I will just mention that mentally ill people are often called lazy, whether it's due to depression, schizophrenia, crippling anxiety,
Right.
because lay people don't know what they're going through and can't understand that it's the mental illness that causes this problem.
Right.
So with abolition in schizophrenic people, I would say, just like with getting the parent to take medication, I don't know how a child can help with that. Mental health professionals don't know how to help with that, except to make sure they get the person on the right combination of medications.
Right.
And if that works, then abolition may subside. So if a child or an adult child is looking at this, I would say, get your parent to a mental health professional.
Okay.
You can't do that by yourself. And it's frustrating, it's heartbreaking to watch them, like I watched my mom stare at the wall. It could be that they're over medicated. It's not a child's job to figure out what's going on with that.
That's such an important point, because when I was a child and my mum was on medication, they were these red pills, and my mum would kind of hide them, because what it created was like it sedated her, and it made her saliva very thick, and she got a tick, and she said, I just don't want to go through that. And
And you can understand that.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know when that was. The newer medications are better about sedation and
Yeah.
creating such awful side effects. But
Yes.
yes, but there are still a lot of side effects.
This was, say, 1990,
Yeah,
1992.
they've progressed a lot since then, but there's still
Yeah.
problems. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom is actually was on Fluanzol, and
Okay.
that it was like night and day, the difference. Once she was stable, it was like I had recuperated my mom. So that's why it's so hard
Yeah.
to
To see her stop. Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. The medications can be life-saving.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunately a high percentage of folks who will go off of it for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's up to the mental health professional, I think, to take a look at why do you not want to take medications. Let me help you. See if I can help with that.
Children are often parentified. The roles in a
Mm,
family become reversed, and they're heavily relied upon to take care of the ill parent, the siblings, even the household. The responsibilities thrust upon them is overwhelming.
mm.
I believe these children are brave, and also that they're instinctively trying to survive. So, Margaret, what do you consider the qualities of children of schizophrenics are?
Mm. Another good question. And the people I interviewed, were high functioning enough to come in for an interview. And they were just, by and large, very brave, very wise. Uh, this experience had injured them in many ways, but had also matured them in many ways.
Yes.
They were often, as children, beyond their years in abilities to cope, to help others, to be aware, compassionate, and aware of other people's suffering. I will say I don't have percentages on how many children have those stellar qualities. One of the things those interviewees told me is, yes, I'm doing well in my life. I'm doing this and that. I'm ambitious. I'm taking care of myself and others. But nobody's asking me about how I am emotionally. And the emotional wounds are often very deep.
Yes.
So, and that doesn't show with survivors like they are.
Right.
And again, I had many people tell me that they had siblings who, as adults, were not doing well. They were maybe on drugs or alcohol to a fault. They were too anxious or depressed to come in for an interview. So I don't have statistics about how many fare well and how many don't, and how much of it is about genetics and how much of it is about environment.
Mm.
I do know that I believe from what we've talked, I believe you're a survivor as well, and I am, meaning we got through it and we did a lot of good things with the talents we picked up by taking care of mom. And so good for us. For survivors, I would say also take care of yourself emotionally. Allow yourself to get with a therapist or some resource that allows you to process the trauma you probably went through.
Margaret, I would like to talk about guilt.
Mhm.
As a child of a schizophrenic parent, there's guilt on many levels.
Uh-huh.
Being able to do enough, feeling guilty that you're not perhaps doing enough, and also the guilt you feel when perhaps you express intense emotions or you're venting to somebody who doesn't understand this, and you're faced with comments like, but she's your mom, she's ill, why would you be angry at her?
Mhm.
Why do you feel resentment, or why are you sad if it's something that, she didn't choose, she's not doing this on purpose?
Mhm.
And there's an underlying, maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but it's almost like they're suggesting, why aren't you a good daughter?
Mhm.
How can we process the guilt?
Mhm.
Because it's something that I think we face on a daily level almost.
Mhm. Well, and I think a lot of people think in either or terms, like it's either that your mom is mentally ill or you have needs. It's both.
Right.
So a lot of people don't understand. Yes, she was mentally ill, and that's a tragedy. And it affected me in these ways, and I'm grieving about it. The trauma affected me in these ways, and I have grief about it. It's not either I'm taking care of her or me. It's both. It's both and. Even the local NAMI group where I am in Atlanta, Georgia, when I first started going to it, there was not a children of a schizophrenic person or siblings, because their stance was, we're focusing on the person who's ill. Why would we want to focus on you? It's grown a lot since then, and everybody's come to see that it's everybody that needs help.
Right.
It's not either or. I know in my own family, I went to a family reunion about 20 years ago, and some of my cousins said something similar to what you're saying, which is, she was mentally ill. How could you have a problem with that? And I said, well, it affected me and my sister too. Also, it's not, again, not either or.
Yeah, those comments are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But
But people haven't been through it. It's hard for them
yeah,
to wrap their heads around the whole picture, the totality of it. That's one reason I was hoping to write my book, to have people say, oh yeah, I didn't even think about the families and how hard it must be for them.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I remember an uncle said to me, how's your mom? And I said, well, she doesn't want to take a medication. Oh, Sandy, just tell her to take a medication.
Yeah.
She'll be right.
All right. I mean, that's just a logical response. This whole dynamic is not logical.
And I told my brother, and we laughed so hard because
Right.
if it could be that easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. So unless you've been through it yourself, or you're a mental health professional who can relate to the family, I think it is really hard for most people to understand without education.
Margaret, over the years, you've organized and facilitated support groups for adult children of mentally ill patients. Did you feel you were healing when you were acting as a mediator in these support?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Always learn from my clients. And this, again, was a group that I wanted to be a participant in, and there weren't any. So I started it.
Right.
And I not only facilitated the groups, I participated when it was appropriate. And so I got to do a lot of healing that way. Definitely.
That's amazing. And I think that even these sorts of things, everybody tries to find their own way of dealing with this life experience and healing.
Yes, definitely. And whatever, works, I would say, go for it. People tell me they do meditation about their trauma. Yoga helps with trauma memories. And I say, do whatever works for you.
Okay.
Journaling.
Right. Because that leads me to my next question, which is, what advice would you give to the children of schizophrenic parents that could get them on a path of healing today?
Yeah. And again, it's whatever you're drawn to for healing.
Okay.
Of course, as a therapist, I think therapy can be extremely helpful. And any trauma therapist can probably help somebody who has some training in working with trauma, even if they haven't had specific training in working with growing up with a severely mentally ill parent, should be able to assist in working through the memories and the effects for adult children.
Okay. And you mentioned the journaling and the yoga, meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are a lot of ways to healing. And I like for people to find, at least one thing that is useful to them. Some people do a lot of different things.
Right.
And a lot of people who grow up with schizophrenic mom, and of course there's degrees of schizophrenia and degrees of, maybe they had an aunt who helped, but not all the time. And so they're not as traumatized maybe as somebody else. But a lot of people who grew up in this circumstance can be diagnosed with PTSD post-traumatic stress disorder. And if that's the case, I would encourage you to get some help.
Okay.
There's a lot of help. There's a lot more information that we have now about how trauma affects people as children and how it affects them as adults, the lingering effects, than there used to be. So
Right.
I want to encourage people to reach out and explore what's available to you. There's several good books that people can check out. I know that you and another woman who is the child of a schizophrenic mom are looking at starting an online support group,
Yeah.
which I think is wonderful. I would look at schizophrenia.com. They have a section for adult children. I would encourage you to look at NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. They have a very extensive list of books, including some for adult children, on their website. There is a branch of NAMI in Australia, I believe.
Oh.
There's a big movement in Australia for
Yeah.
adult children. I actually talked with somebody there years ago about that.
I know that there is a really good infrastructure in terms of mental health workers and the support for the patients, which I'm glad that when we moved to Australia, my mum developed the illness in Australia because we have that support. If
Good.
in Mexico, I think just because here it's a very weak part of it's like you deal with it on a family level and that's it. There's not the support like in Australia. We would have the social workers come to our house every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
We don't have that here. I'm jealous. Wonderful.
Yeah, and it was like, oh my God, Sean's coming again, and what that was going to
wow
for my mom. But it was amazing. At the time, it was also very scary because when you're a child and you know that these people are coming and they're there to help, but you see how your mum reacts to that and how it's something that creates even more chaos. You're like, oh, please don't. But in hindsight, it was amazing. And I think that has probably gotten better. I mean, at this point, my mum was having a nurse go to her house and give her the medication every 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
And,
wonderful.
Yeah.
I do not know of many communities that have anything like that in the US.
Oh.
So that's wonderful. Great.
Margaret, well, we've come to the end of the interview, but really the reason that I want to do all of this is because I would like to reach people that and specifically the younger kids, because I remember when I went through all of that, and at one point I even considered suicide because it was just too much. It was 10 years of, I'm going to get emotional again, but 10 years of really struggling and it's not only that you're dealing with your schizophrenic parent, it's also that, you know, you're going to school and perhaps going through bullying and finding your own identity and being rejected. And because you've had this life experience, then that for me, it was, who am I? Where do I fit in? So it was a very layered, painful experience that at one point when I was 19, I thought, I think it would be better if I just wasn't here. And there was one day where I really considered it. I was driving and I was just accelerating. And I had a moment where I thought, God, if I have to go now, just give me the courage to do this. And if not, let me just calm down fast. So I did. And thank God I'm still here.
Wow.
Because 2 or 3 years later, I mean, we went full on with my mom, going to psychiatrists and medication. And I was like her strong person, and she was able to become stable. But really the motive to do all of this is to reach those kids and to, like you said, as survivors, you do come through it, that there is hope. I mean, there are ways. It's going to be hard, but that's why I'm putting myself as an example, because
wonderful.
When you get to the point where it's like, if I don't exist anymore, it's fine. When you're really considering it, I think that's as bad as it can get.
I agree.
And if you can perhaps if there's a child that sees this, maybe a teenager or somebody in their early 20s or anybody who is struggling with the residual effects, that they can know that it's not going to be easy, but there is a way beyond, and there is life beyond.
Wonderful. I really support that message.
Yeah.
Appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Margaret. It's such a privilege. I feel that this is almost surreal because your book just impacted me, and like I said, I've read it twice. And anybody out there, I'm gonna put the link up for Margaret's book so that you guys can read it. And I really appreciate it, Margaret.
Well, and I appreciate you as well for doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.